fear and faith have one thing in common, and it's the future. Fear thinks the future's bad. Faith thinks the future's good. And for me, think about that phrase a lot. Like, hey, if I'm having bad thoughts, there's a fear piece into it as opposed to a faith.
What if winning at work didn't have to come at the cost of your home life? In this episode of Seek, Go, Create, the Leadership Journey, we're joined by Cory Carlson, a former executive turned coach, speaker, and founder of Rise, a faith-driven community helping leaders integrate purpose, family, and business. As the author of Win at Home First and Rise and Go, Cory equips leaders to lead well at work and thrive at home. We'll explore what it means to build your life on the rock, lead authentically, and pursue impact that lasts for generations. Whether you're a CEO, entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking more alignment in your life, this conversation will challenge and encourage you. Cory, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Tim, thank you very much for having me. And I enjoyed our conversation before you even hit record. So I have no idea where we're going. It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. It was kind of one of these deals that we go, man, we got to get the recorder going because this is some good stuff here.
Yeah.
So, man, let's start with this isn't an icebreaker question. This is like a deep into the pool question. Which would you rather answer? What do you do? Or who are you? Go ahead and pick it and start answering.
What do I do or who am I? Man, I don't know. Maybe some days I'd answer it differently or I'd pick the different one to answer. The one I'm going to go with is who am I? And it's top of mind because of a call I had this morning. I was talking to a prospect. Does he want to engage in coaching or not? And, it's usually a fact-finding question. Hey, what do they do? Tell me about your business. Tell me about your family, just, the journey. And one question I kind of always ask is, why now? Why are you reaching out now to me to possibly hire me as a coach? And that usually unfolds just a great depth of conversation. And so when I said, why now, his response was, well, about a year ago, I took 6 weeks off because I was burned out. He goes on to explain the story that as he was leaving a kid's activity, he felt he was having a heart attack. Went to the hospital and through it all, ended up taking 4 weeks off plus 2 weeks of his vacation. So a total of 6 weeks off. And obviously, oh, wow, man. And as we talk about the burnout, why the burnout, we got to this point where his identity was in what he did. His identity was being a successful business owner. And even though it was a prospect call and I may lose the prospect, who knows? But I was like, this is an opportunity. I need to talk to him and help him. And so what we talked about is our identity can't be tied to temporary things because they will go away. His identity was tied to his job, his success, his revenue, and that goes away. And many listeners probably are familiar with this idea, but just due to the demands of work, he drifted and he was tying his identity to work. Same thing if you tie your identity to your kids. What happens if your kids flunk out of high school or an unplanned pregnancy? Does that mean you're a bad dad? A bad mom? When we take our identity to temporary things, they go away. So to answer the question, who am I? I'm a beloved son of God. And from that, I then can be a husband. I can then with confidence be a parent. I can then be a coach, a speaker, a writer, a friend, a community leader, whatever it could be. And years ago, I learned this phrase that I still lean into a lot because, approval can be a challenge of mine. I want to be liked by others. But when I recognize my true identity as being a beloved son of God, then I know I can then operate from a place of approval as opposed to for approval. When I'm always searching for other people's approval, I mean, it's a endless chase. And therefore, that is who I am. I am a beloved son of God.
That's good. One of the things that's part of the way I'm made up is the need for significance, which is related to that need for approval. I think if they're not the same, they're definitely related.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing to want to be significant. I don't think it's a bad thing to want approval. I think it's bad when it starts to drive you and you become addicted to it and you start striving for it in all that you do. So many things around that beloved Son of God that I think I want us to discuss before we go further because it's foundational. And then I also want to come back to that identity because of the community you have, the books you've written. I'm guessing that that identity issue comes up time and time and time again. But before we get to all that, I'm kind of teasing the audience a little bit and also trying to keep myself on track. I love when someone answers, I'm a beloved son of God. It sounds good, but I'm going to be a bit cynical here and say it also sounds like church language,
Mhm.
something that some of us might say. So, first question is when did you start recognizing and realizing that you were that? And then, secondly, give me a little bit more of what that looks like in your life. How does that translate into either actions or inaction or whatever?
It totally does. I'd fall in that camp too of being cynical, beloved, son of God. Yeah, church language. That's real great. And I was that way for years. I am 48 and I'd say in my mid 30s is when I really started to embrace it more. And it's really been just more of a piling on of good information and experiences and mentors and coaches pointing me the right scripture and helped me learn that's just gotten better and better since that. And for me, dates, kind of dates back to in my mid 30s of striving, of kind of grinding and doing all these things and realizing myself similar to that prospect story I said of burnout. Luckily, I never had to take a bunch of time off, but through a variety of things in all areas of my life, from m low valleys in the marriage to financial woes of almost having to file bankruptcy when a bunch of real estate deals went bad, to just work and that endless pursuit of more, more, more. Through all of those, I realized that they aren't working, they aren't bringing joy, they aren't bringing happiness. And the thing about Christian-y things is they're all trying to fill that, hole in your heart that only God can fill, which I know sounds kinda cheesy, but I felt it and I experienced it, that all those other things were endless pursuits. And then if I spent time recognizing that God is, and I haven't even mastered the praying to God as my father. Like some people are really good about that. Sometimes I'm father, sometimes I'm God. It kind of depends on the day where I'm at. I mean, it's still a journey. But as a whole, understanding that how much that, he loves me and he created me and I'm uniquely and wonderfully made as all the listeners are, that I'm a beloved son. And so I need to step into it. And, I step into it through prayer, through quiet time, through different verses to, trying to make sure I'm pounding the nail every day to put God first and paying attention to that as opposed to, drifting into, well, emails and how many followers I have and how many books have I sold and what's the revenue. All temptations I have, trust me. And there's a framework I use that I was taught years ago. This was part of the process of me getting better, is learning what was called the five capitals. The five capitals is, first is spiritual, love God. Second's relational, love others. And what does that look like? Third is physical. It's about managing your time and energy. Fourth is intellectual, about insight and ideas. And the fifth one is financial, and it's about stewardship, generosity. But those are the five capitals. I didn't create them. My coach did years ago, but I learned them in probably about 2012, 2013 when I hired my first coach. And that is a framework I keep going back to recalibrate, to make sure I'm not putting financial capital as my priority and to making sure that I'm going to spiritual. So long-winded answer there, but just to say it's been a journey. I have some tools that help me because I, like anyone else, if I wake up, it's like, oh, let's get right to email. But I'm like, no, I need to make sure I am recalibrating against this framework that I know to be true.
So as you listed out the 5 Ps, is that what you said?
5 capitals.
5 capitals. The last one was financial, but I think what often happens is many of us that we'll call them high performers. Sometimes I'm a little uncomfortable doing that because I think there's some people that perform in the task that God's assigned them to, and they do it well and it's quiet and they go about it. We've got an odd view, I think, of high performers in our world today. We won't go down that path. But my guess is that you, Corey, are one that, and I know a little bit of your background because I've done some research. You were always one that probably performed well when you were out there doing your thing and pursuing, let's call it financial success. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely, man. I am stereotypical, the Enneagram fans. I'm an Enneagram 3. I want to be the achiever. I'm a sales guy, or I still am selling stuff, right? You give me a goal or metric, I'm going to go hustle and try to get it.
And I think the follow up to that, I don't think that's a bad superpower to have, but that can real easily become kryptonite. I think it's a superpower in, we'll call it the world system. But I think the kingdom of God, when we start trying to function in that world, I think we realize maybe there's some different rules there. Where's that transition for you? When you mentioned some time periods and all and some things that went on, but when did you realize that maybe I'll refer to Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things will be added unto you. I recognize for me that up until about '08, I was pursuing the things more than the kingdom and his righteousness. Was there a point that you went, ooh, I got this verse flipped a little bit.
Oh man, yeah. And that is a life verse for me too. I love Matthew 6:33 and seek first the kingdom, and that's putting the 5 capitals in the right order, right? It's spiritual, then it works its way down. So yes, that verse, the framework, those were all pieces that helped me kind of figure out, hey, there's more to life than just a sales award. There's more to life than getting this particular revenue number or getting this job title. It went a step further when I went all into coaching March 1st, 2020. So I left corporate. My corporate career was a civil engineer degree, got involved in selling construction technical products like bridges and storm sewer. Did that in Kansas City, then Denver, and then eventually get to Cincinnati, where I led a division there. And that's when I hired a coach, which changed my life in the standpoint of I got better as a leader at home and work. But then I wanted to do it, and I do it now for a living. So I left corporate America to then become full-time coach. And I did it on March 1st, 2020, which, yeah, I mean, the worst time to launch something. And for all the listeners, I know we all experience pain, and some of you maybe experience deaths. I get it. And sorry for that. For, me and my family, I'm the sole provider. March 1st, 2020, we went all in. Let's go. Come on. This is going to be amazing. March 13th, Friday, March 13th, which I'm not a superstitious guy, but it is weird that Friday the 13th is when it all went down. But that's when we all got emails, stay at home, mask mandates. On that day, I got emails canceling speaking and workshops. 35% of my revenue on that day vanished. And it was like, well, what's next? Like, what about the other 65%? Are they going to terminate? Are they going to end it? God took me on a journey because I was frustrated. I was angry. I've got journal entries kind of saying that of like, hey, man, I did my part. I took the courageous move and got out of the boat and left corporate to do this entrepreneurial. Like, where are you? What happened? And so God takes me on this journey over the summer, and I put together a lot of my findings and what God was sharing with me. I put them in blogs to help really just kind of other people. And even a client would call and say, I'm kind of struggling with this. I don't know, resilience or perseverance. I was like, hey, I wrote this blog this morning. Why don't you read it? Well, when it was valuable to them and I got enough positive feedback, I'm like, well, I guess here's a book. I'll write a book. So the book I wrote is called Rise and Go. The main idea of Rise and Go is all leaders get knocked down. It's just the great leaders get back up quicker. What could it look like in your life if the next time you're knocked down, you're able to get up quicker? That's the idea of the book. There was a piece in that journey to answer your question, Tim. How do I balance ambition versus godly ambition, selfish ambition? How do I find what this looks like? Losing all that revenue March 1st, 2020, as I'm cruising through that summer of 2020 and on into 2021, my whole typical response to that was I'm working harder. If I'm a solopreneur, then I got to spend all my time on LinkedIn. I got to find leads and more clients and more podcast interviews and more. It was hard to shut it off. Like I got better at the corporate world of figuring out how to shut it off and realizing I didn't have all this control. But when it shifted in the solopreneur world, I didn't know how to shut it off because it was all dependent on me. If I wasn't doing anything, well, I'm not going to get any leads. God pointed me to Psalm 127, 1 and 2. Unless the Lord builds the house, he who gets up early labors in vain. And when I read that, and then the next verse is, talking about the watchtower. Unless he watches over, he labors in vain. On the watchtower component, as I'm reading both those verses, I start to think, I hear this kind of audible voice of God's got the night shift. If I work hard from 8 to 5, I have to have trust. I have to have faith that God's going to take the rest of it. That while I'm at family dinner, while I'm playing with my kids, and even inside 8 to 5, if I'm traveling, I have to have faith that while I am doing other activities, that God's softening a prospect's heart to say yes. That God's got some potential clients talking about having me come in for a workshop. And same is true for you, Tim, and for the listeners. It's just like, hey, if we do our part, bust our tail off during the working hours, we have to have faith that God's got that night shift. And so an additional phrase that I was hearing is I control the input and God controls the impact. That if I am doing my hard work, God's going to show up and provide that impact. And so that's a boundary I have. Because of that phrase, I've put things in place to do a digital Sabbath on Sundays, to charge my phone in the other room at night as opposed to, looking at it kind of when I go to bed and first thing when I wake up. I've deleted social media off my phone, or there's just different things I've done to help me stay focused.
Sure. One of the things I think that COVID did for many of us, '08 did this for me, so COVID was a little bit different, was that I realized that I just wasn't in as much control as I thought that I was.
Mhm. Mhm.
And talking about that there is control something that you enjoy having over your environment? And has that been part of your struggle also?
Yes and no. And I say no because there's other folks that I know have a lot more control challenges. I've kind of been more the thought process, the kind of freedom of the framework when it comes to parenting, when it comes to other elements. I don't like details. I mean, I'm not a detail guy. So there's a lot of times I've never had control because haven't never necessarily studied it all. But yeah, I mean, I do want an element of some control. And with sales my whole life, it's eat and kill. You go hunt and it's yours to have. If I know how many sales calls I need to make, I know how many proposals I then need to send out and then how many prospects I'll get, right? It's the funnel. And so over my whole career, I've been able to figure out this funnel for my business. What I was overextending on as I stepped into coaching and speaking full time was I'm going to make the top of this funnel as wide as absolutely possible by never turning it off. But that's when I realized, hey, I'll work hard from 8 to 5, make that funnel smaller, and trust that, well, all my hit rate will go up. So I can have the prospect. So I think that would be the way of control. Is there's many pieces I couldn't control except what I did. I think I've been
Mm.
okay with people what I can control, but it's more me and just working harder, driving.
I had this weird season where I was really digging and spending a lot of time with the Lord. And I think maybe this was a lesson for me, but it appeared to be the less that I did, and I'm not against hard work. This is not what I'm saying here. The less that I did, the more financial resources I had coming into me. It was this really, really odd season. And I don't know that I totally got the lesson, but it was something that was trying to get me out of that entirely. If it is to be, it's up to me. type
Mhm.
mindset, you
Yeah.
know? I'm guessing you see a lot of that in your community. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, even like generosity. I mean, there's this kingdom math. I mean, it seems like I have a very good friend who's a wealth manager, and he has made a comment that the more generous people are, it's almost like they have more money in savings than everything else. And it's probably both practical and spiritual. The practical side is if you're generous with your money, you're probably budgeting pretty well of what you're giving away. This is what we're spending. So there probably is a practical component of that, but there's also the spiritual component of it. Of it's you're stewarding God's resources. And another resource God gives us is time. And how are we stewarding his time? And I think a big piece for me and for many listeners, maybe, or at least leaders out there as a whole, is sometimes we forget or we think about that our only job is here on earth is go crush it in the work world. Let's be the best revenue generating person in our, out there, and let's go get the titles, let's go get the money, let's go get the raises. That's our function. But no, it's also to be a father or a mother, a father, a husband, a wife, a community leader, like all those elements. And so we wear many hats, not just the financial piece. And I think that is a part that has helped me a lot to understand that I want to make sure I'm dating my wife. I need to make sure I'm having one on time with my kids, meeting up with my buddies, getting to the gym. Like there's a lot I need to do other than just make sure I'm working all the time.
Yeah, and so there's one thing that's really intriguing for me before we dive in a little bit more to kind of what all you have going on right now. When I hear I'm an engineer by training too. I'm an industrial and systems engineer, but yet here I am on a podcast and do coaching and stuff like that. And then I heard you say that really sales is kind of your thing, but yet I see the civil engineer on the on your
That's right.
resume. And so I guess I want to back up a little bit and maybe ask a little bit about what were you thinking you were going to do in life as you were younger? What did the plans you have? What did you think you were wired for? Maybe even a little bit of how you grew up, because I'm always intrigued. I think all of that begins to layer into where we are today. So, my first thing is, how did one go from civil engineer to sales? It could be technical sales and things, which is fine. I get it. But you
Yeah.
don't really have, listen, if you and I were bumping each other on the street, I wouldn't be going, "Oh, look, Cory, he's an engineer, I can tell." No, the way you look and everything like that. I don't know that people would say the same about me either. So, what's up with
Funny.
that? And tell me a little bit about more about to kind of frame how you were raised.
Yeah, go career raise first, right? What's the right direction to go? I guess we'll just, I from a career standpoint, I don't know if I ever knew what I want to be when I grew up. I mean, I don't know if I had anything burning. Two parts have come into mind right now as we're talking is kind of that in the high school years of trying to decide what to go do. I knew I loved development, like cities. I loved going to cities and seeing skyscrapers and seeing just activity. Like it's just always something I've liked, and I still do. And so that was an element. That was the positive element. I guess mixing one more in there positive is, I was good at math. And so that was circulating of, hey, be an engineer. I didn't know what to do. And be an engineer, they make good money. A negative vibe in all that was I remember, and I don't think this was for bad purposes. She probably was trying to protect me. But a counselor said, I don't think you're smart enough to be an engineer. I don't know if those were the exact words, but it's something along those lines that, maybe your scores aren't high enough to be an engineer. I do think it was probably out. I'm going to assume the best. I'm going to assume it's out of love. It was to Cory, you may be going down a bad path. It's going to be a disaster and whatever. However, in college, I went civil engineering route, and I think there are some days I'm like, this is going to get me to the path of doing development, whatever that looks like. And I think there are other days it's like, I'm going to prove this lady wrong. I'm going to show her that I'm smart enough. So I don't know how much getting through college was just about proving this lady wrong. I don't know if it was about pursuing this idea of what I would do. I don't know. What I do know is thank goodness for Yeah, I was able to graduate. I then take a job at a great engineering firm, awesome firm, Burns McDonnell, great firm, and still in contact with them today. But I'll just tell you, I didn't love my job. I mean, obviously that's why I left, but I just didn't love it. And I've got buddies who stuck around, they're still there and they love it. But for me, I was impatient. I think that if I would have had some patience, it probably would have been great. It would have stuck there. But I just was impatient. I was getting bored designing the thickness of airport pavement and the elevations of all the different joints on the concrete slabs of the runway and the taxiways. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. And, so I was definitely wandering. I think not only professionally, but I was even kind of wandering personally. And so that all factored into it. Like, I need to do something and I need to be up and to the right and comparison and seeing other buddies get promoted and probably money they're making and cars they're driving. It all kind of came to I need a new job. So I did find a great next job where I did sales of civil engineering products, storm sewer, bridges, as I mentioned, and then that began the process of sales. And so that's how I got into engineering, which then went from to sales and then leadership roles and now the coaching. And so that's the career progression. What's crazy, Tim, and this may come into your life as well, man, it's God, nothing's ever accidental. He uses it all for good, as the promise in Romans, and, I mean, it's all for his glory, and so for me, I mean, I got clients in non-construction spaces for sure. I have clients that I can relate to because they're in the construction space, and I know what that's like, and I can feel it, so it didn't necessarily go to waste. It's been fun to kinda see it come full circle. So that part's pretty cool.
Yeah. One of the funny
Yeah,
things you brought up that you were good at math. My journey was very similar.
yeah,
Both my parents were educators. I thought that's what I wanted to be, teacher, coach, until I found out how much money they made. I didn't know we were poor. I wanted to make more money. So I said, oh, engineer, I'm down the road here from Georgia Tech. Let me go there. And so, and I was good in math, but here's what I found out. I wasn't as good as most of those others. That's what I found out, and it was just like, "Ooh, boy, they are getting together, and I think they're studying some of this calculus, differential equation, stuff like that. I think they're doing some stuff without me around because they seem to know more than I do."
yeah.
So, that was an
And I
interesting part of
think
my
my
journey.
counselor knew that, and that's what I think it was yeah, like I said, out of love that she was trying to protect me, but in my immaturity, I didn't take it as protection, I took it as an insult.
Yeah, so anything we need to know about growing up? We're about to dive into current stuff and all of it. Anything else about did you grow up in a family of faith or,
Yeah,
was there money driven or was money just a thing? Or what was some of those things that you
mhm,
had growing up?
yeah. So I did grow up in a Christian home, awesome home, loving home, present father, which was amazing, and incredible mom. So all that was great. The big part that affected me, and we'll talk about, how it affects me now, is my mom passed away when I was 15 years old from cancer. She had a 7-year battle with cancer, passed away when I'm 15, which obviously was a big bummer for sure. In all that, I got to see, my dad take care and love on a wife that was dying over a 7-year period of time. And we had great moments, I don't mean as a decline the whole time, but obviously she ends up passing. But great childhood. So he was able to love and serve her. So I got to see what good marriage looks like. I don't know how he did it, but he parented us three with the help of my mom, but eventually she passes. And so he's single parenting us for a while. And so when my mom passed away, I was 15. My brother would have been 12 and sister 11. So, he had basically a bunch of people young and they're, before 10. And then he had me and my brother and sister 15, 12, 11. So you have this range of kids that he was taking care of a sick wife, still had a full time job traveling, doing sales and loving and present for us. What's wild is I don't remember him missing a game. I know he did. I know he missed games. He traveled, but I don't remember him missing them because there felt to be such a presence that he was always around. So that, even though we never talked about the phrase "win at home first," and I just got to see it modeled, which is really, really cool. And fast forward to now, I go back to a lot of that I learned, fortunately in the home. So that's the very good stuff about my childhood.
Yeah, so
A Yeah.
Now keep go.
Yeah, the dark side of my childhood, or the element that I wrestled with for numerous years, is when my mom passed away, my dad became unemployed for parts of the time before and after, just typical sales. Hey, we don't need you anymore. We're downsizing or this or that. Well, in that, money had to be spent from college savings for chemo and whatever the case would be. The savings went down. So when it was time to go to college, it was all on me to get loans or get a part-time job, and there's nothing wrong with that. People do that, that happens, they're successful. For me, the devil got a hold of my mind to say, "Listen, you see this? If you're ever gonna make it in life, it's all on you. Your family's college savings gone. You can't count on anybody else, God or anything. It's all on you from a provision standpoint." I believe that. And I think that was another factor. Like, I gotta get this engineering degree. I need to get the money. And I think that's probably when I got into my 20s. I'm like, this engineering job is too slow. I need to somewhere else to make more money. Fast forward, I think that's always been a reason for my drive. I mean, I'm also competitive, and so that there's a factor for my drive at work. But a factor of it for sure was the devil telling me I'm the provider and God's not.
Yeah,
Cool
which is,
story.
well, I was going to say there's an element that we don't like to admit, which there's fear there of not
Yeah,
having, right?
yeah, yeah. Fear of not having, and so fast forward, I'm writing my second book. I'm talking to my dad about all this, and he's like, "Man, I don't think you ever heard this." I was like, Well, what?" And he goes, "Man, well, you're talking about this time where money was tight, and it was, but our church stepped up and paid for a year of our mortgage." And I was like, "What?" I had no idea. So with not all the full data, I was believing this lie that the devil's getting in my ear, that it's all on me. And now unfortunately, decades later, I find out that that's not true. And in fact, God showed up, paid for a mortgage for a year. That helped me break some remaining chains that I had holding me back, thinking I'm the provider. And now I've got this faith that, hey, God's my provider. And it kind of all plays in together. If I control the input, God controls the impact, all those pieces. And so that's the great side of my childhood, of understanding love and marriage and parenting, all those pieces. The bad side was that financial story that I'm breaking free. I'm still broken and not perfect, but it has been a step in the right direction for sure.
So here's kind of a trick question. Do you think it really would have changed anything had you had that data at the time? Or is it something we just look back on now and say, well, maybe, but and again, it's a trick question because it's who knows?
Yeah, I really just don't know.
Yeah.
It kinda all it comes down to it. I don't know what I would done differently. Even not knowing that story, there is a part of me that I still got comparison. I still have envy. So if I knew that whole story all along, it's still like, well, I want the bigger house, I want the better car, I want the title, I want the things. So I'm sure the comparison monster was gonna show up, maybe even a little bit more, to fuel that ambition, to fuel that approval of others.
I also think I've come to terms with the time frame that I was raised in had an impact
Mm,
on me. I kind of came into age, the late 70s, early 80s, the greed is good decade.
mm,
I feel that fed you mentioned you always wanted more. I had an addiction to more. Whatever
yeah.
was going on, business, whatever, wasn't addicted to, some of the vices that people would say. I was addicted to the things that allow people to be successful
Mhm.
in the
Yeah,
world system. Then
yeah.
it brings my next question. You mentioned you're 48. We were talking age and decades before we clicked record. Maybe this is a good time to get into that. But I was just going to ask, how are you defining success right now? And then I'm sure you're a vision and kind of a strategic guy. How are you beginning to look at your next decade, which you're about to hit halfway or whatever, your 50s? Talk about success, how you're defining it now, and then what are you doing looking forward for the next few years?
Yeah. That was a great question. Yeah, I'm looking at success in a lot of different categories. Like, I think the old me may have quickly defaulted to kind of a revenue number or a thought on success from a work standpoint. But as we even mentioned the 5 capital's earlier, I mean, success for me is going to be able to be the best version of my whole self I can be. So, things I'm paying attention to as far as what would make me success is I'm working to grow closer in my, walk with God. When I started this year, it was I want to get better at prayer. So I ended up getting this amazing 5-year prayer journal. It's big and thick, and I'm holding up the camera for those listening to the podcast. And you open it up, and it's blank. It basically gives you the date, August. I open it up to August, and then you got 5 different blanks for the years. So I'm writing in that every morning. I love it. A company called Hosanna Revival. I don't get paid for saying this, but Hosanna Revival made it. I'm using this. I'm doing a devotion every morning with my 12-year-old son. Daily wisdom for men, right there. It's that one. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm growing spiritually. So that is, and there's other elements of it. How can I grow closer to God, closer to my walk? Success, relationally. I want to make sure I'm dating my wife, 2 times a month. I'm doing one-on-ones with my kids and making sure I'm doing time with friends, like paying attention to where am I at relationally and what does the intentionality look around that piece.
Mm.
Moving over to work, I track revenue and I want to be successful there, but I'm also just tracking impact. I'm trying to pay attention to how many people am I able to impact. I track it through, is it podcasts, is it speaking audiences, is it books sold, number of clients, podcast downloads. But anyways, just trying to figure out, hey, how can I help share this message with more people? And I know it's not all on my doing. What's crazy, Tim, is we can go grind as hard as we want, but one person can open up a door that introduces you to 20 people that it would have taken hours and hours and hours on LinkedIn to try to find those 20 people. And I may never even found them. And so there is this piece of it where it's like, I'm just going to keep working hard and, I'm confident that God is going to control the impact. You made the comment earlier about fear. Fear and faith have one thing in common, and it's the future. Fear thinks the future's bad. Faith thinks the future's good. And for me, think about that phrase a lot. Like, hey, if I'm having bad thoughts, there's a fear piece into it as opposed to a faith. And so I think about that a lot.
So you excited then about crossing over into your 50s?
I am. Before we hit record, I just shared, we were talking about you and your age, and I mentioned this book, Decade by Decade. It's got some similarities to the book Halftime by Bob Buford that many people have read or are familiar with. This book, Decade by Decade, it's different, and it's definitely worth reading. It's thinner, it's easier. It talks about generational. It uses S's at every generation. There's an S word. I think security is the 0 to 10, and it's all about yourself in your teenage years and kind of survival in your 20s. Anyways, it's got all these S's. But the most fascinating piece is the number one decade that this guy has put together that he believes that people have based off on all of his clients and the research he did, that the number one decade people have is their 60s. And it's because they probably are confident in themselves. They understand their identity. Relationally, they got great relationships. Financially, they're in a good position because they're not paying for all kid youth sports or whatever it is. And they're in their high earning years. So their 60s are there. So when you ask the question, how I feel going in my 50s, I'm optimistic because my 60s, if they're supposed to be my best decade, that means I got a 10-year runway to that. And so it's only going to be better. So I'm very optimistic and bullish about what can be from a family standpoint, kids graduating college and high school and what that part looks like of what our family grows and can be. And then from a work standpoint, I've got some books I'd like to write, or additional books, get out there and just continue my mission to help, connect people to greater performance at work and home and into their purpose.
Yeah, that's good. When you brought it up, I'm sitting here going, man, I am fired up here in my 60s. There's a lot of cool
Yeah.
stuff going on. One of the big things for me, and I don't know, this might sound harsh, but you kind of get to the point where there's a lot more of don't care what
Yes.
other people think, don't care what that sounds negative, but some of our personalities need that, need a little bit
Mhm.
more of a don't care.
Yeah.
So I want to back up one quick thing. I don't know if you could hold up the daily devotions for men again.
Yeah.
We interviewed Dan and Jimmy a while back, and I just want people on the video and all to note because we'll probably include that down in the links. That is one of the most beautiful, well done devotionals that I have ever seen. Just the leather, I mean, just the way it's done, isn't it?
Yep.
And
Oh, it's
it is
amazing.
really cool. It's cool you're doing that with your son. So I wanted to give
Can I
that,
put
even
one
though
more?
they've been on the podcast,
Yeah.
they've been here.
Yeah. Now I'll put a plug for us. I just told Jimmy this the other day. He came inside. Well, both Dan did as well. They spoke inside the Rise community. So I
Nice.
lead a community of men who want to grow in home, work, and faith. We have calls every Monday from 12 to 1 Eastern. And then once a month, we're bringing in speakers. I had the opportunity to have both Dan and Jimmy in there. I have to get you in there as well. And I told Jimmy, I think I told Dan this as well, but what I love about this devotion for anyone listening to it and thinking about, hey, maybe I would do it with my child as well, or son. It's simple enough, like they're short one pagers, but it's simple enough that my 12-year-old stays engaged, but they're deep and profound enough that I stay engaged. And it's just been awesome. It's been really, really cool. And yeah, we've been doing it, I guess, 4 months now or 5 months, whatever we're at.
My struggle, and I could work through this. My struggle is I keep getting them and giving them away. And so I'm sure they hate that too. I'm sure they hate that that's what I'm doing with it. You brought up Rise. We've got a little bit of time here. I'd love to spend our time remaining to talk about your community and two books. I mean, we could spin off from that. Let's go to Rise first. Tell me about the formation of the community and let's see what we could glean and what we could learn from bringing together men in a group like this, because many times people are isolated. They think that their situation is the only situation, and they do not understand all the other things that people are going through, and that people are probably going through exactly what they're going through. Maybe not, maybe the names are different, but tell me how the community developed, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you're learning from it. Not what you're teaching, but what
Yeah.
you're learning from it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, two elements that how it developed is one, in my one-on-one coaching calls. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching calls. There would just be these moments where I like, oh man, I wish you knew so and so. And sometimes I'd even make that introduction, like a text introduction. Like these two know each other. Maybe they're in the same state, or maybe they're in the same industry, or kids are the same age, or whatever it was. I'm like, or they're battling the same issue. But I just was like, oh, you two need to know each other. And so that was a piece of it for sure. That was kind of marinating that how do I do this? And then in a quiet time, I just felt this big nudge to go build community that I could impact more people. One, I could get those one-on-ones to talk to each other, but also not everyone can afford one-on-one coaching. It's a higher price point than what, Rise community is. And so I was just like, hey, let's go for it. Let me just say, it wasn't easy. I had this idea. I went for it. I battled a lot with we don't need another community out there. There's too many communities. Communities are popping up left and right. Like it seems like podcasts used to pop up left and right. Now it's communities. And I want to know what the next thing is. I'm going to go start that now so we can be ahead of it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a bunch of avatars hanging out. But for me, it was enough nudges. I did hear the head trash, of too many communities, but I pushed through it. We launched it. And it's been awesome. As I mentioned, we do the weekly calls, and then there's just a group, and it's pretty cool. You asked the question, what have I learned from it? Well, we mentioned some names: Dan Britton, Jimmy Page, they've spoke. Kent Chevalier, the chaplain for Pittsburgh Steelers, he was powerful. Davin Solvino, who wrote 12 Thieves of Purpose. I'm leaving people off. That doesn't mean they weren't impactful. It's just at the moment, I won't rattle them all off. But those are some highlights. So what am I learning? Dan talked about the power of having vision. Like we need to have vision. And it was a reminder that I can get a little sloppy on that, or, pulling up for air. I can get so busy in just doing my work. And like I said, let's go on LinkedIn, or let's address these clients. Sometimes I forget to lift my head up and what is the vision? Where am I headed? So that was a good reminder. Ken Chevalier talked about doing it afraid. This idea that there's times we just need to do it afraid, and is a much more robust talk than just that phrase. But it was kind of a kick that I needed. That there were a few things that I needed to do afraid. One of it's a distant family member to have a conversation with them. I'm gonna do. I've started it. I'm doing it afraid. I don't know the result. So not all of it were, hey, go, start this or write this or launch this. They weren't all business related, but there's some things in my personal life I want to go do afraid just to get it going. I think those would be some of the elements I'm learning. I think one thing I would just say to anybody listening is get in a community of something. Obviously, I'd love to have you in Rise, but there's a ton of communities out there. I just watched the documentary Join or Die this past weekend. It's on Netflix. And it's based off this research this man did. Bill Putnam, I think is his name. And he wrote a book called Bowling Alone. The whole idea of this book, Bowling Alone, which led to documentary Join or Die, is this idea that since the 1960s, community involvement has just decreased. This is all before phones and screen time. So we've only made it worse here in the recent decade, 2 decades. But since the 60s, there's data that has less involvement of PTA year after year. Kiwanis Club, Rotary Club, whatever association, down, 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 down. And that's factoring into loneliness. That's factoring into depression. Now you throw in phones, and it just leads us more into isolation. In this documentary, there's this quote, and he says, "We spend more time watching Friends than being with our friends." And I was like, oh, man, that's pretty good. And so I think if you're a listener, look around in your community. Do you have community? Are you spending time with community? There was a book written years ago called Third Place. We have home and work. Those are 2 places, but everyone needs a third place. For some people, that's a bad thing. Their third place is the bar. Do you have a place that you go? You're in community. I just share that for, if there's a listener who's like, you know what? I need community right now. Man, go get it. We were made for community. Iron sharpens iron. We kind of know the taglines and the realness of it, but I'll just tell you, I needed Rise as much as the members, because I've just enjoyed, we have an app, and somebody will post something and I'll read them like, dude, this is manna. This is manna for today that I needed, because it's different postings than you get on LinkedIn. I mean, I love LinkedIn, but these are just deeper. People are talking about stuff they're not going to publish on LinkedIn.
Well, and there's the connection there. It's interesting when you said the research had shown less community since the 60s, and you commented that that was well before phones, but it wasn't before screens. That's really when we saw the rise of television. I think our phones are just TV on steroids, truthfully. You
Yep.
know what I mean? They're just more screen for us. The more that I would do it, I mean, I'm one of these. I could have sat in front of sports 24/7. And then you know what they did? They started making it available 24/7. Probably of
Yep.
the age where you remember when there was, well, I am, you're probably not quite this old, where there were just a couple of football games on Saturday and a couple on Sunday, and that was it. Now
That's
you
it.
could literally
Anytime.
you could
Yeah.
watch anything anytime now, and I think that is really, I think it's devastating to a group. Anything else that you observe with the community where a group of men are attempting to do better that are coming together? Anything else you observe that you can share before we talk about a couple of books you've got and start wrapping up here?
Oh, yeah. One, accountability. And I don't even mean accountability of, hey, Bill, you said you're going to do this, or, whatever. Not that accountability, the accountability of, I got the call coming up on Monday, and I either wrote down on a piece of paper, I didn't tell anybody, but I wrote down on a piece of paper, I need to go on a date with my wife. Or I said verbally I was going to go on a date with my wife. But there's this accountability that a community brings, just even by the calendar appointment being on your calendar, that people are like, ooh, I need to do this. What if they ask? And so there's been some cool stories already of the accountability that they're getting just because of the group. Even if no one's calling them out to say, did you do it? It's in the calendar. There's this kind of desire to do more. So accountability is one. Another are ideas. There's some crazy cool ideas that people do, and of just the intentionality they'll have on a date. Maybe what they're doing with one of their kids. It's like, oh, I like that idea. I want to do that with my kid. Yeah, variety of ideas of how to work out different or whatever it is. You just get ideas that you may not, get anywhere else. You get inspiration. You kind of see a guy in there. He's like for me, I've got 3 kids, but when I hear somebody talking about how they make time for this, and they got 6 kids and, they lead a $200 million division. It's like, well, if they got time for it, what's my silly excuse? And so I think between accountability, outside perspective, getting ideas, and then, plus just encouragement, man, it's pretty darn life giving.
I think maybe the enemy really wants us to be isolated and by ourselves. I think the kingdom and God really desires for us to be connected. And I like what you're doing there with Rise because it sounds like you're allowing people to connect, which is good. Some point along the way, you wrote Win at Home First, an inspirational guide to work-life balance. I've got it on my Kindle.
Hey,
You
sweet.
probably have a copy there, but this is what it looks like on the Kindle. Inspirational guide to work-life balance. And a lot of people do not believe that work-life balance is possible. Say a couple of things about that. Then I want to talk about Rise and Go as we finish up here.
Yeah.
Work-life
Well, a
balance.
couple of things on
Is
that
it
went home
possible?
first. Yeah. Well, let me just say, I was talking to the publishing consultant when I wrote it, and I was like, I had my title, went home first. That was a no brainer. The subtitle was different. We'll talk about that. But the subtitle, went home first, it was a phrase I just kept saying. Yeah, I was with clients and it's like, hey, if we're going to have success at work, man, we have to win home first. And maybe it was applicable because the person wasn't really dating their wife, or it was applicable because they weren't working out, or whatever the reason was. I just kept saying this one phrase. And so that was like, that's it. And then what kind of the nail in the coffin for why I was like, I am 100% using this is I posted cover, like, hey, here are my covers. Which one do you like to use? Or should I use? Please vote. I did something like that. Somebody said, I don't like the title Win at Home First because that means someone loses. If you don't, I'm like, absolutely someone loses. That's the whole point. If we don't focus on it, someone's losing it. It'll be a broken marriage or a broken home. So yes. So anyways, I was like, I'm doing it. So Win Home First was the title. The subtitle, I just told the publishing consultant that it's like, I do not like the word work-life balance because I don't think it's balance. Can I do like work-life harmony? Can I do something different? And the funny part was the publishing consultant said, listen, if you were Jeff Bezos or somebody else, you could come up and make up a name or a phrase and it would stick. In a loving way, she's like, you're nobody. You got to stick with the SEO. You got to stick with balance. So I stuck with balance and I'm fine with it. What I would have to say about work-life balance is, no, there is no balance. I mean, obviously just from a work standpoint, we are at work, just an hour standpoint, we're at work more than we are at home, when you take away sleeping. And so that's just odd in itself. But how I view work-life balance or this idea of work and home is being intentional, making sure you recalibrate when seasons get off. My seasons can get off as well. I travel at different times for work. Maybe I've got a publishing deadline. Maybe I've got, some other deadline. So it's like work. But then when I'm done hitting that deadline or I'm done traveling, then I recalibrate, come back, and I'm making sure I'm intentional with at home. Get those one-on-one dates with my kids. Make sure I get with my wife. Take some time off, whatever that is. And so that's the only thing about the balance piece is it's like this pendulum swing is, hey, are we having intentionality with both?
Yeah, and then so that book, which obviously I think is done extremely well, you followed it up with Rise and Go, how to get back up with courage and move forward with confidence. I actually really love the tagline on that one there. But give us a little
And
bit
that was
about
before
that.
ChatGPT too, man. That was an inspired thought that I had heard.
Did they let you go more with what you wanted there, or was that more of the publishing consultant kind of?
Yeah, there no, that was I was able to go with what I wanted. I'm sure they helped tweak it, but had no big objection to it like I did the other one. But yeah,
Right.
so I mean, Rise and Go is 20 chapters. first 10 are, the courage to get back up. And then the next 10 chapters of the comments go forward. It's written like a devotion, not short ones like we mentioned for daily wisdom for men. They're longer, but it opens up with scripture. Then it has story, whether it's mine, it's clients, it's somebody else's, followed by reflective questions and application at the end. And so some people read it like a devotion. Their men's groups have used it and others have used it. Some people use it as a resource guide because each chapter doesn't necessarily build on each other. So you can look at the table of contents and say, I need something on hope. I need something on, you know, what rejection, whatever that may be, and then hop to it. And I know some guys do that and they'll send me notes, which is pretty sweet.
That's good that it's topical because that helps people go
Yeah.
when they need it. So that's a good thing. I've got one more question, but before I do, where can people find you? Where can they get all your stuff? Either Rise or the books or whatever. Mention it and we'll include it down in the notes.
Yeah. The books are available on Amazon, and Win Home First is on Audible. I have not done Rise and Go on Audible, but they are on Amazon. As far as social media, I'm very active on LinkedIn. That's how you and I met. I am on all the other social media platforms, but I'm not engaging like I do on LinkedIn. So connect with me on LinkedIn. That'd be fantastic. Websites, CoryMCarlson.com. And then I've got blogs and podcasts and information on coaching and speaking. But I'd love, just reach out if anyone wants to talk about any of this. This is how I like to help people.
I
And
listened to
whether
a
they
few
turn into a
episodes.
client or not,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I listened to a few episodes over on Win at Home on your podcast, and I love the one where you interviewed your daughter who's in college. That was the one
Oh,
that
cool.
it
Thank
tells
you.
you what I was drawn to too, doesn't it?
I'm getting all my kids on this podcast, my podcast, because that's the most downloaded ones. The most downloaded ones are, for at least some for me, are not some of the biggest names. Been
Yeah.
my it's been my kids. I've only done one kid twice. A couple solo shows I did, just me talking.
I think it's the heart. I think people are looking for story and heart, and I think that's what that does.
And
Final question. I'm calling this my exclamation question. I'd love for you, Cory, to speak directly to a man that may be struggling with this topic we've been talking about and just encourage him, uplift him, or if you feel like you need to, give him a swift kick or whatever the Holy Spirit's leading you to do, just take a few seconds here and just give some encouragement to a man in whatever age bracket that, he needs someone to speak some good into his life right now. So let's do that. I'll finish this up and we'll be done.
what a fun assignment, yet challenging assignment. Well, first of all, thank you for listening this long. If you made it this far, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I pray that you found something valuable here. Hearing a podcast like this can be intimidating. I know for myself, when I hear it, even to this day, I mean, there's things I get intimidated by. My encouragement for you is to grab one thing I said, or Tim said, or the Holy Spirit said during this conversation to prompt you to go do something, to say sorry, to say, I forgive you, to ask for forgiveness, to maybe make a bold move at work or go on a date or to spend time with a kid. But my encouragement is to take that one step, because nothing changes unless something changes. And so taking that one step can make a change. The other thing I know to be true in my own life and working with a lot of different clients is we start to make a move and the devil will say, you're going to go on a date. You've been a dirtbag husband. What are you talking about? Or you're going to do this with your kid now. You've been absent for the last few weeks, few months, or whatever the thing is. But whenever we step into something new to be courageous, the devil gets in our ear. My encouragement to you is there may be something of your past that may have an element of truth to it. Maybe you've not been the best husband. I haven't either. Maybe you've not been the best parent. I haven't either. But there's this element that the devil wants to keep you right there and keep dragging you down because he wins. If you stay in the same place and he can keep playing the same old soundtracks, same head trash, you'll stay there. But what I love to encourage and remind myself of is to release that. You are not defined by how you were as a parent, as a husband, as a leader, as a friend. You're not defined by that. And starting today, you can live differently. You can take a step in a new direction that leads you into being that better father, that better husband, that better leader. And so that's my encouragement to you. Hopefully that encourages at least one person to step into who God has uniquely and wonderfully made them to be.
I think that is perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Cory Carlson, a beloved son of God, has joined us here, and he just shared there at the end that I think is powerful. Somebody needed to hear that, and probably a lot more. I appreciate everybody joining in. Make sure you get the resources that Cory mentioned. Check out his books and the Rise community, and go check out Win at Home. If you're on a podcast player right now, you could jump over and check all that out. So make sure you do all that. We have new episodes here every Monday, just like this, with cool guests that are speaking things that I believe that we all need to hear. I need to hear it. That's why I have the conversations.
Indeed.
So I believe that you need to hear it too. So I appreciate that. Keep listening, liking, and all that kind of stuff. And we will see everyone next week on Seek, Go Create. Hey, before you go, I want to leave you with a challenge. If you're enjoying the conversations here on Seek, Go Create, I think you'll love the deeper journey my novel Coach, A Story of Success Redefined, takes you on. It's a story that's moved many of my readers to rethink what success actually means and how to live a life aligned with faith, purpose, and peace. Pick up your copy today wherever you buy books or at timwinders.com and begin the journey for yourself. Thanks again for listening. And as always, keep seeking, keep going, and keep creating.